Hello, everyone. Welcome to Barca News. It is March 8th, 2026. And ladies and gentlemen, Marc Ciria is set to file an appeal in these presidential elections. Also, we're going to talk about the huge blunder that Laporta Font committed in his latest discourse. And finally, we're also going to talk about the exchange in heated statements by both Font and Laporta, who are now firing back at each other back and forth. We have a lot to discuss. So let's begin. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Boo, and today's video is exclusively regarding Barcelona's 2026 presidential elections because, ladies and gentlemen, Marc Ciria has filed an appeal with the Catalan Football Federation. Now, as I reported previously, last Monday was the deadline for the pre-candidates to submit 2,337 signatures in order to become official candidates. And while Marc Ciria submitted 2,844 signatures, more than what is required to become an official candidate. However, after Barcelona, or the club I should say, went through every single signature of every single pre-candidate, they invalidated close to 500 signatures from Marc Ciria, bringing his total down to 2,247 signatures, below the 2,337 required, and therefore Marc Ciria was officially disqualified from becoming an official candidate, with only Joan Laporta and Laporta Font advancing to the next stage. Well, now Marc Ciria has submitted an appeal to the Catalan Football Association, saying that out of the 500 signatures that were invalidated, 379 of those were invalidated without any reason or any justification, and therefore he is looking for those 379 signatures to be counted once again towards his total, which of course would bring him back over the required minimum and he would make him an official candidate. Of course, we're gonna have to wait and see where this appeal will go, but there's only like 7 days left in the elections, so I don't know if that's gonna give Marc Ciria enough time to become an official candidate again and still be able to campaign. By the way, one thing I don't like about the Barcelona elections, there really isn't enough time. I mean, last Monday was when Font and Laporta became official candidates, and 2 weeks later, not even 2 weeks, 13 days later, it's the actual election day. I mean, that's 13 days only to campaign as an official candidate. I don't know. I feel like maybe they should probably change that. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. Now, speaking about the presidential elections, we do have to talk about the huge blunder that Laporta Font committed while discussing on why he should be, the person that the socialists should vote for. And this is what Laporta Font said while comparing his candidacy comparison to Laporta, because as you know, Laporta Font has been on the message of that these elections is not about choosing a candidate. This election is more about choosing the old model versus the new model, where he believes, Barcelona needs to be more professionalized, the way it's ran, become more corporate, where roles are more clearly defined and where you hire people who are qualified for that specific role, as opposed to how it's been run so far, where it has been more of like a boys club, where, Laporta surrounds himself with his buddies and they kind of just rule however they see fit, very improvised. And the same has been, by the way, before, even with Bartomeu, Rosé. We've seen that, over the years, and Font believes that now Barcelona needs to be run more like a multinational corporation, right? Well, in his speech comparing this new versus old model, Laporta Font committed a huge blunder in saying the following. This is about choosing between the Barca of the past and the Barca of the future, between the Barca of a few and the Barca of everyone. It is a proposal that contrasts, of course, with the Barca we have had for decades, the Barca of opacity, of a lack of transparency, the Barca of Negreira, of the Neymar case, of Barto Gate. So Laporta Font committing a huge blunder here. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand what his point is. He's promising kind of like a new, more professional club that is going to be free of scandals. For example, the Barto Gate, that's when Bartomeu hired PR firms to talk crap about players like Messi, Piqué, to talk crap about Victor Font, about Gian Laporta, pretty much anybody who opposed Bartomeu. Bartomeu hired PR firms to talk crap about those people. The Neymar case was, of course, a case where there's fraud in the whole signing of Neymar by Bartomeu and Sandro Rosé. And then, of course, the Negreira case where Victor Font kind of like blaming Gian Laporta a little bit about the Negreira case, which he is true. Gian Laporta does take part of the blame for the whole Negreira case. I mean, so does Joan Gaspar, right? Because Joan Gaspar is initially the first president who hires Negreira's company. Then comes Gian Laporta, who not only continues hiring Negreira's company, but actually starts paying him more. And then there's, of course, Sandro Rosé, who continued paying the companies of Negreira. And then there's, of course, Josep Maria Bartomeu, who even though stopped paying Negreira in 2018, he still paid him for 4 years because Bartomeu, of course, becomes president in 2014. So, yes, all these presidents, Gaspar, Laporta, Bartomeu, Rosé, yes, they are at fault for what was going on with the Negreira case because even though there is no wrongdoing, they should have known better. They should have known, hey, this is not a good look to pay the company of one of the vice presidents of the CTA, right? Even though it wasn't to bribe referees or to influence competition, it's still not a good look. So I get the point. Victor Font. But you're making a huge mistake. And I think Font is making a huge mistake for 2 reasons. First of all, he's buying into the whole Real Madrid story of the Barca of Negreira, kind of like trying to label Barcelona as this cheating club that bribe referees in order to win everything they did, which we know that's not true. That's why it's been 3 years since the investigation was open and not a shred of evidence has emerged, right? So Victor Font, even though he's trying to send the message that, hey, the new Barca is not going to be run in, iffy way, you're buying into Madrid's, or feeding into, I should say, into Madrid's rhetoric, which they call the Barcelona of Negreira. And a second reason why Victor Font, I think, is making a mistake is because he is, blaming Laporta for this, which, yes, is true. Laporta is partially at fault for the whole Negreira case. But that happened during the first presidency of Gian Laporta, right? And we're not here to discuss Laporta's first presidency. We're here to discuss his current presidency, right? So Victor Font should be talking about what Laporta has done and hasn't done during this presidency and, trying to make a case against that, not make a case against Laporta's first presidency because that's not what we're here to talk about. So definitely a huge, huge blunder by Victor Font, who so far his messaging has been very, very off because as I've said before, I agree with Victor Font's message that Barcelona needs to be more run like a multinational corporation, to be made more professional, where there are clear, defined roles, where professionals who have experience in those roles can work in those roles. I agree with that. But unfortunately, we haven't heard about that too much. It's all has gotten lost in the weeds because Font has dedicated most of his time to criticizing Laporta rather than emphasizing his own agenda, his own platform. And I think that would have been a much, much better message rather than F Laporta, vote for me. Forget about Laporta. Just say, this is why you should vote for me because I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E. I think that would have been a much better and clear message. But it seems like Font doesn't really have the good communication team because from not expressing too well what his platform is because he's too busy criticizing Laporta to now doing this, calling it Barca's Negreira or Negreira. Victor Font, bro, you need to fire whoever your communication director is because your messaging is not on point. Now, during yesterday's podcast, of course, we talked about, or was it podcast? No, Friday's podcast, we talked about the exchanges that have been going on between Laporta and Font, where they both have been going at it. And well, more exchanges now with Gian Laporta saying the following. Not retracting his comments about Negreira's Barca is obtuse, stubborn. If he doesn't retract them, that's his problem. He was out of line. It's disrespectful to Barca fans. Barcelona would lead to ruin. Barcelona will be run by a computer, not by hearts. Font runs Barca on his computer, while the Barca we've all built is carried in our hearts through hard work every day. They're a bunch of know-it-alls who think they know everything. So Gian Laporta again firing at Victor Font, saying that he should retract his statement, which 100% I agree. I think, again, Font made a huge blunder saying that it was Negreira's Barca. And then, Laporta calling kind of Victor Font a technocrat, someone who's going to run Barca as a computer rather through his heart. And now Laporta's the one who commits a blunder because, bro, honestly, I would much rather that a computer run Barcelona than be run by heart because this is a multinational company, a multi-billion-dollar company that generates close to $1 billion a year in revenue. One of the biggest clubs in football, one of the biggest sports club period around the world. And telling me you're gonna run it with your heart. Like, I'd much rather be run like with a computer, bro. Because I mean, that's the whole main complaint about John Laporta, is that he runs shit just like with no plan, no foresight, just improvisation with a heart. And it's like, that's not how you run a multinational. Okay. You think Steve Jobs was running Apple with his heart? No, that's not what he was doing. Anyways, Victor Font responded to John Laporta with the following statement: Barca doesn't need saviors, but projects. We have been presenting proposals for some time. We are still waiting for a proposal from Laporta. Barcelona need a different management style to guarantee competitiveness and the ownership model. A new model that allows us to compete with state-owned clubs, as opposed to a management style based on improvisation and backroom deals. So Victor Font kind of replying like, okay, you're saying I'm a technocrat. Well, what's your proposal? We haven't heard it, right? And he's right, by the way. There has been no proposal. Laporta has not come out with any single proposal on how he plans to run the club for the next 5 years. It's mostly been a populist campaign, where his campaign has been just him going out and, fraternizing with the public, hi, hello, appearing at events. But he hasn't really said anything. He hasn't said, this is how I plan to run the club for the next 5 years. So Font's kind of like, okay, you're criticizing my proposal. Well, what's yours, right? And he has a valid point. But I got to say this whole back and forth, Victor hitting at Laporta hitting back, I think it's distracted both campaigns from what they should be focusing on. Like I said, Font needs to be focusing on what his platform is rather than criticizing Laporta. And as far as Laporta, well, I would say he should focus more on his campaign and what he has to offer. But honestly, he hasn't told us what he has to offer. So I think both campaigns should get back on track, put their platforms out there, tell us why we should vote for them rather than going at it back and forth. Anyways, that is all the news for this video. We'll be uploading 2 more videos. Yes, you heard that right. 2 more videos, because there's a lot of news. So stay tuned to the channel. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment. And as always, Viscarsa.